Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. That was awesome, and I'm sure you guys all agree with that. Next, I'd like to introduce Marianne. Marianne has lived here in Chico for 35 years, where she worked as an executive and legal secretary up until she became a full-time caregiver in 2012. She has 2 adult daughters, one a PhD teaching at Chico State and the other a physical therapy assistant working in a skilled nursing facility in Lodi, and both are present here today. Marianne and her high school sweetheart, John, who is also her stroke survivor, found each other in 2002 after 34 years apart. Please welcome Marianne.
I'm afraid of that thing. Good afternoon. It's really nice to see such a good turnout here today. Thank you in advance for listening to my story. My name is Marianne. My stroke survivor is John. Stroke, such a small word for such a heartbreaking experience. Before the stroke, we had a very happy, full life. I was a legal secretary, and John was self-employed as a mobile detailer. In his spare time, he built decks both in front and back of our home. He also remodeled the entire house, room by room, all by himself, and was especially proud of the sanctuary he created for me in my bathroom. He enlarged it to 3 times its previous size, built a walk-in closet, installed a corner jacuzzi tub, and he decorated it himself to look like a peaceful forest, which is my favorite place. We went camping with our family a couple times a year, where John played guitar for us, and we had many family gatherings in our home. We took drives and went out to eat often. John has a wonderful sense of humor, and he made me laugh every day. Excuse me. We have thousands of pictures documenting our wonderful, rich family life. I still look at those pictures fondly, but it's bittersweet, because every time I look at them, I want our old life back. And I know John wants this too. But it's in the past, and I must let it go. It took over a year for me to finally accept that the life we had before the stroke was gone, never to return. Time keeps going, no matter what you do with it. So rather than wishing for what we had and becoming depressed, I've chosen to look ahead and have faith that with our hard work, the quality of our lives will improve. 16 months ago, January 19, 2012, a day like every other day. There was no hint of what was about to happen. I went to work, and John was off work that day. He even took one of our cats to the vet that morning. I went home for lunch as I did every day, and went back to work at 1. At 2:02 p.m., John called my cell and said, "I'm having a stroke." It was a miracle that he was able to make that phone call. And another miracle that I even answered my cell, since I usually don't at work. I raced home while my coworkers called 911. The ambulance was at the house in less than 15 minutes. That's when John became a stroke survivor, against the odds. He had had a rare hemorrhagic stroke, or brain bleed, in the pons of his brainstem, inoperable. There was no magic clot buster to fix it. There was nothing they could do, and I was told by the doctors that he might die. But John's not only a survivor, he's a fighter, and I'm proud to say he keeps fighting to get better. He doesn't give up. March 9, 2012, 14 months ago, and 2 months after the stroke, we began our new life. John was discharged from the rehab hospital, and that's when I became a full-time caregiver. I'm sure those of you who are caregivers will be able to relate to many of the details of my story, our story. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge my two daughters, Becky and Cindy, who have stood by me throughout this whole process, as well as Farshad Azad and Andy Roby, dear friends who became family. And my best friend Judy is always there when I need her. We were very lucky to have extended family that came through for us when we needed it too. I could not have managed without all of you. Our new life opened up doors to many new friends. I was amazed at the outpouring of help and love extended to us. I also have so much gratitude for the wonderful rehab nurses who were so patient and kind and taught me how to give medications and food through John's feeding tube, as well as the many other nursing tasks I needed to know to take proper care of him. It was really tough when we first came home. I had no idea how hard it was going to be. You just don't know until you're in the situation. I was overwhelmed at what I had taken on. But I was fortunate enough to have strong family support. The amount of work and time on my feet at 12 or more hours every day came as a big shock. I learned to love my Dansko shoes. And if you don't know what those are, come and see me later. They save my feet, knees, and back. I went to bed every night physically exhausted and emotionally drained. For the first 2 months, I slept on the couch next to John's hospital bed in our living room because I was afraid to go too far from him. It was another shock when I realized that with this new job, there are no days off. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no weekends, no vacations, no sick time, no holidays. And as a paid in-home supportive services employee caring for John, I am disqualified from receiving free of charge respite relief from any agency. But thanks to my children and Andy, every so often I get from a few hours up to an overnight away for myself. And when I can, I take 10 to 15 minutes outside where it's peaceful on the wood decks that John built. But even with that, I need to be within earshot of him. Since John's stroke was in his brainstem, it affected both sides of his body in different ways. Thankfully, even though he lost sensation on his right side, he could still move his whole body. He kept his intelligence, memory, sense of humor, quick wit, and cognizance, but the stroke affected his ability to speak, and we have a hard time understanding him. He also has trouble swallowing, which means he has trouble eating, so he receives the major portion of his nutrition through a feeding tube. He can eat some solid food, but it must be pureed. As time went on, he began to have double vision and also lost some of his hearing. And he has ataxia, which gives him uncontrolled spastic movements. Physical, occupational, and speech therapies do help, but because of insurance setbacks, they have been too inconsistent to keep a strong forward momentum. 3 months after the stroke, John began experiencing a burning sensation on his right side, which increased over the months and has remained at a constant level 9 to 10 pain. Can you imagine having to endure that for 24 hours a day? Most people turn to narcotic pain meds, but since it's nerve pain from damage to his brainstem, narcotics don't touch it. He's just had to learn how to tolerate it until we can find an alternative that works. We keep searching. We even tried Reiki healing and acupuncture. Unfortunately, those didn't work either. In January, John had a baclofen pump implanted to help his ataxia and pain. But after 7 weeks of hospitalization and medication trials, where he had 3 bouts of pneumonia and other complications related to the baclofen, it was deemed unsuitable for him. He still has the pain pump, but it just has saline in it until we find something else that will work. John was eventually referred to a pain management doctor who gave him an epidural injection, and to our surprise, It didn't help his pain at all. Since his pain has been tricky to address, the pain management doctor and John's physiatrist are now coordinating treatment in the hopes of coming up with something that will work. We've had many blessings too, which we try to focus on. Today, John has a special walker that lets me walk alone with him, whereas a regular walker requires 2 to 3 people because his balance is also impaired. We are looking forward to receiving a device that will let him effectively communicate with us. We attend church regularly because our faith helps us keep moving forward. And we both enjoy taking Tai Chi classes at Azad's Martial Arts Center, which develops better coordination and upper body strength for John and helps us both physically and spiritually. John was also admitted into the Be Well program at Chico State, where twice a week during the school year, kinesiology students work with him to gain knowledge on how the human body moves in relation to a brain injury. We expect in the fall he will also be admitted into the speech disorders program at Chico State. And when his insurance allows, he will keep going to physical, occupational, and speech therapies at outpatient rehab. When John first came home, Independent Living Services very graciously loaned us a temporary ramp, for which I was extremely grateful. Now we have a beautiful permanent wood ramp, thanks to Farshad Azad, who organized getting a professional to design the ramp, the materials donated from Home Depot, and a wonderful group of students from construction management at Chico State to build it. I've learned a lot in the last 14 months. First and foremost, I have to be organized. We got a whiteboard right off the bat, and my daughter Becky spent 5 hours labeling it with thin strips of tape so I can make lists and check off tasks. The whiteboard has been a lifesaver. It keeps me on track most of the time. Believe me, I make mistakes every day trying to be organized. One of the hardest things I've had to do is accept my failures. Am I doing the best I can? Yes. Am I going to make mistakes? Yes. But as long as they're not life-threatening, I need to let it go. Second, I've had to learn to be patient. John and I have had some periods of great frustration in managing his capabilities, and at times I have become very impatient with him. But as time has gone on, I am better. When you have all your own abilities, it takes time to accept that the person you love so very much has lost most of his. And now you have to move very slowly and allow plenty of time to do everything on his time. We can't just hop in the car and go somewhere. It takes planning and patience. I've learned many new skills over the last 14 months. I've become a chauffeur, secretary, nurse, dietitian, cook, launderer, housekeeper, teacher, psychologist, respiratory therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, and even sometimes the doctor when I can't get a call back in time and I need to make an executive decision about some aspect of John's health, all while trying to maintain our affectionate and loving relationship. I've learned that at every doctor or therapy appointment, I need to be an advocate for John. As caregivers, we must ask questions. I've learned that I need to speak up if something doesn't seem right. I've learned that doctors and nurses are human, just like us, and they make mistakes. That's why we, as caregivers, must keep a watchful eye on the healthcare professionals, especially if our stroke survivor is hospitalized, to make sure the right medications are given on time, meals are delivered timely, baths are given, and if necessary, repositioning in bed regularly. Nurses and doctors are overworked and often short-staffed. I've never had any healthcare professional rebuff my questions. They've always been happy to have my input and answer all my questions regarding John's care. So don't be afraid to speak up. Ask your questions and expect answers. I gave up a pretty good paying job as a legal secretary so that I could stay home and take care of John. I loved the legal work, but there was a lot of stress. Before John's stroke, I remember asking God many, many times to please let me find a job where I could work at home, where I could be closer to John. So that's what he gave me, but certainly not in the way I expected. The truth is that this job as caregiver is not a job I would have chosen for myself, but I love John. Being his caregiver gives my life and his purpose and meaning. He has told me many times that he appreciates everything I do. With this magnitude of required care, many people are forced to send their loved one to a skilled nursing facility because it's often just too much for one person to take on. So I exercise regularly and try to watch what I eat and try to stay mentally healthy so that I can continue to care for John. As caregivers, you know that each day is almost exactly like the day before it. They all start to run together, and it's hard to remember what day it is or even the date sometimes. John's had a very slow recovery, and there are no easy days. But we try to celebrate the small things, like a perfect transfer from bed to wheelchair or wheelchair to car, or a perfect swallow of pudding. And John still makes me laugh every day. We keep going and we keep hoping because that is our choice. We won't give up. We've been told that recovery from a stroke never stops. Even the smallest improvement means there is still recovery happening. There is a reason that God has chosen us for this difficult path. As John always says, if it were easy, anybody could do it. And there is a reason that John is still here against the odds. John wants to contribute in some way, and he keeps working hard to recover capabilities so that he can make a difference in someone else's life. As caregivers, we give meaning to the life of our stroke survivors as well as our own. As caregivers, we are so busy taking care of our stroke survivor that many times we become isolated. It's hard for us to go out and make a difference to the world, but to our stroke survivor, we make a world of difference. Thank you.
Andy and I decided that we needed to add Angel to Marianne's list of what she does. Angel at the top of the list.
You did good.
She did very good.
Yes, she did. Okay, now we're up to our question and answers.